Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We are a channel all about tabletop gaming. My name is Wyatt, and today we're going to be talking about the new book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Secrets of Magic. So Secrets of Magic falls into the rulebook line for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That means that it is primarily focused on giving you new mechanics to use at your table. But just like some of the Lost Omens books do, this one is really sort of bending the parameters of what those rule books are. Just as the Lost Omens books are adding a lot of mechanics sometimes, see the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide video that we did. This one is also adding a whole lot of great lore, and as well as some sort of pseudoscience about how magic works in the world of Golarion, which is the core setting. And even if you're not playing in Golarion, it's still a really nice sort of deep dive into what sets apart the different traditions of magic in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So first things first, we got two new classes here. We have the Magus and the Summoner. We did videos on the playtest, as well as some stuff about after the playtest. The good news is they listened to a lot of the feedback, and both classes are looking better than ever in the final version, which, you know, makes sense. You don't ever want to do a playtest of a version that you know is too good and then release a much worse feeling version, even if it is more balanced for whatever reason. So, you know, like sort of like we said back during the playtest, expect these to be the weakest these classes will ever look. And then, because it's a lot more fun to have them tuned up than tuned down from the playtest. Now, these two classes do share a lot of similarities between each other. They are both functionally these sort of hybrid martial caster classes. They both share pretty similar advancements in terms of their proficiencies and saving throws and things. But there are a lot of big differences in how they approach these same ideas. We're not going to do a huge deep dive on these classes because they are going to get their own class videos, just like we've done for all the other classes. But I will just sort of say, wave casting is still a thing. I feel a lot less weird about it than I used to. Both classes, I feel, have a lot of good tools to sort of flex what they're capable of there. And as somebody who has more recently taken the dive to being all free archetype all the time, it's really not too bad if a player thinks that their Magus build is not going to feel like they think a Magus should feel without a wizard dedication, as an example. I do think that both classes have a lot of room for concepts and execution of those concepts without needing any sort of multi-class to get more spell slots, although I'm sure a lot of builds will go that way, just like a lot of builds already do. But it's definitely not going to be the only sort of characters that you can build are ones that are getting more spell slots from somewhere. There's a lot to these, and I can't wait to do those videos and for you to see it because I'm really happy. My players are really happy, in terms of the ones that are, we're chomping at the bit to see these classes as much as I was. And I think you'll be happy too. We got a lot of new spells. We got probably over 100 for sure. I haven't done an actual count. And we got a few more variable action spells, a few whole new types of variable action spells, and a whole lot more cantrips, which, if you haven't played Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you might be thinking, oh, great, big deal, cantrips. No, cantrips rule, and having as many of them as possible is awesome because they scale so well. So just having all of these little options that you can spam, use as much as you want to, that can fit all these different situations. We got a lot of the damage types that we were missing. Divine got a lot of really good damaging cantrips as well. So if you are playing a cloistered cleric and you don't want to rely on a crossbow, you don't have to anymore. We also got a ton of new focus spells, both for the Magus and the Summoner, as well as for some of the other things that we got. A lot more to this book than just Magus and Summoner, as we will get to shortly. But we got a lot of new focus spells, and we also got some new rituals. Some of them are really nice. There's one to summon a magical carriage, which was a spell in 1e, but I think works a lot better as a ritual. Rituals, in case you don't know, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, they're really cool because you don't have to be a spellcaster. You don't have to have any spellcasting abilities. You can still learn rituals. They take a lot longer. They oftentimes will have a large gold or other sort of investiture required, but anyone can do them. And we got a lot of really cool ones. We got summoning a spectral carriage. We got one to animate an inanimate object. You could have a magical fork friend if you wanted to. Never have to, scoop your own spaghetti again. Scoop? Who scoops spaghetti? That's weird. We also got a whole lot of new magic items, some nice low-level magic items. I think between this and some of the other recent releases, we're really getting to a pretty good point in terms of magic items. We got some really neat new runes for weapons and stuff like that as well. There's still some that I'd like to see. The developers made a decision to have very few low-level magic item options, and the ones that are there are pretty weak, which is fine, except that there are some really good ones for certain types of classes. And I'm not talking like different builds, because there's a million different builds, but there are definitely some ones that are really good for set classes, or like just wide character archetypes, and then other character archetypes still feel like they need a little help. Primarily, there's not a lot of good low-level options for martial characters in terms of magical support versus skill and caster characters that can get magical items dropped from a pretty low level and feel pretty good. But this does help a lot. There's a little extra there. But again, it is still sort of primarily magic focused, and that's okay. Just a little place I'd like to see. And hopefully the Grand Bazaar that's coming out soon is going to fill some of those gaps as well. And we know that Guns and Gears is going to have not necessarily magic items, but certainly some more little deployable or just little minor items that you can give your players theoretically without needing to be a spellcaster to use them, since they're going to be tech-based. But there's still some really cool stuff. There are grimoires, which give you certain bonuses with certain spell types. There are these like little paper tags that you can apply to things, and they have some pretty specific and very cool uses. There are also these things called spell hearts that are really, really cool items. They're sort of like trinkets that are more focused towards spellcasters, but even if you're not a spellcaster, you can still get some use out of it. There are also these consumable components that you can add to spells to improve certain aspects of them, like Fireball, for example. You can make your Fireball a little bit better by spending this kind of expensive little extra resource. You don't have to, of course. You can cast Fireball without it, but if you do have it, your Fireball's just that little bit better. The other big thing with items is we got some new Apex items. So if you don't like the standard ones that you get at level 17, these are some alternatives. They fit into different item slots on the body, so that they don't have to. So that maybe you won't have to compete as much. If you really like a headband you get at lower level, and then you need to get that headband of intellect or something later, they're not fighting over a spell slot or an item slot. From there, we got some alternative rules for Magic, including some new archetypes and things like that. Now, we did get multi-class archetypes, of course, for the Magus and Summoner, and we don't really cover those too much in the class videos, so I will say that Spell Strike is an option if you're multi-classing into Magus, but it's only once per minute or once per 10 minutes. I'd have to double check. So it's not something you're going to be able to use multiple times in most fights. If you're having an 11 or 12 round encounter, then congratulations, you probably get to use it again. But Summoner does get their Eidolon right out of the gate. There are some weird rules interactions if you are not a native Summoner. If you're a multi-class Summoner trying to use your Eidolon, you will find that it just doesn't work as well because it's not a minion. You can't command it and get extra action, so your action economy gets really bad. And there is some strange interaction specifically with the mount feat that allows you to mount your Eidolon. Rules as written, it doesn't work if you're not a native Summoner because you can't use what are called tandem actions, which are how they work around the action economy a little bit. And any move action that the Eidolon takes is considered a tandem action. You can't use tandem actions as a multi-class, ergo you cannot mount your Eidolon. So is that intentional? I'm not sure. Is that just a weird little, weird way that the rules bump up against each other? I don't know. At my game, if somebody multi-class Summoner, I would absolutely let them ride their Eidolon, but your table may vary. And again, if you're going rules as written, it's a no-go. But beyond those multi-class archetypes, we have some really cool stuff. We have Cathartic Magic, where you choose one of 10 emotions, and whenever you're afflicted by one of those, an easy example is fear, then you are able to sort of use that debuff to your advantage, turn it into a buff, get some pretty cool abilities, but then a few rounds later, it comes back with a vengeance, and you're in a really bad spot. I don't personally love this. It seems like a lot of extra work for a good payoff, admittedly, when it's working out, but when it doesn't work out, if you need more than those 3 rounds, you are in a really tight spot afterwards. So, your mileage will vary there. It's certainly interesting and could be very, very cool, but I'm not crazy about it. The next archetype we got was the Elementalist. The Elementalist is open to anyone who is a spellcaster, who is, I believe, from the Arcane or Primal spell list. Yes, Arcane or Primal only. It had we had thought that there was going to be a limitation that you had to be a full spellcaster. That is apparently not the case, which means Summoner and Magus are both open to take this. What's interesting about the Elementalist archetype is that it's a class archetype. You take it at first level, but it does eat your second level class feat, or archetype feat if you're playing with free archetypes. And what it does is it changes your spell list. Now, this is something we talked about before, about how only having 4 spell lists might feel a little bit limiting, but that's not going to be the case. I don't know how often it'll happen, of course, but this is the first one we've seen, and it's pretty promising the way that it works. Essentially, they, just like in the old first edition, they just give you a list of spells that are the Elementalist spell list. And then the problem is that, there's always this thing where you'd say, well, okay, well, how do you expand on it? How do you add more? Well, they geniusly are using the traits, all the little boxes that you'll see alongside spells and pretty much everything really in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Well, they said, okay, well, if it's got the air, earth, fire, or water tag, even if it's not on this list, if it's added later, you can add it. It also says that your GM may make other determinations, have some other ideas for spells that would fit. I personally think it's weird that we don't have electricity and cold. They're not the 4 basic elements, and I understand, but, I think that's fair game. But again, your table will vary. Officially, it's just those 4. But I just really like that because, they've given us this list that in other games, in other editions, it would be like, okay, well, we'll see if they remember to add more spells for this, spell list in the next book, or, in 2 years if there's ever any more. But there will almost certainly be plenty of more spells that have the earth, fire, water, or air traits going forward. So it's really nice. It's just a little easy way, especially, as you just look for the tags, basically. Oh, why don't I have this spell? It's an air spell. I do have this spell. But I was just really impressed that they were trusting their system and using those tags. From there, the rest of the feats for this dedication, the dedication itself also allows you to pick an element that you gain some resistance to. But anyway, the rest of the things are all about taking advantage of those elements, using them to empower yourself, getting certain advantages and things like that, and just playing with those elements. It's a really cool archetype. It can be a little bit weird to think about giving up certain spells for this much smaller, more curated spell list with a lot less versatility than either the Arcane or Primal. But I still think it's going to be really cool for a lot of builds. Next up, we have the Flexible Spellcaster. That's a really nice thing that allows you to get sort of the 5e spellcasting feel, where you have much fewer spell slots, but you have a lot more options of how you spend those spell slots. So you'll have a couple of spells prepared at each spell level. You can sort of heighten them around as you may or may not need to, but you're not actually assigning a spell to a spell slot until you are expending the spell slot. So instead of saying at level 5 I can cast Dimension Door once and I can cast my Heightened Fireball once, you're saying I have Dimension Door and Fireball, and when I spend one of my 5th level slots, I'll decide which it is, or even if I'm going to heighten one of my lower level prepared spells. It's very versatile, very nice, very flexible, as the name suggests, but you are paying a pretty big premium in that you're only going to get 2 spells per spell level instead of 3 or 4 like some do. Now, you will technically still get your bonus spell slots if you're a wizard, for example, and you do the school focus, but it's going to be a base of 2 plus a bonus instead of a base of 3 plus a bonus. Then we have the Geomancer archetype. The Geomancer archetype allows you to pick elements, theoretically the elements that you are out in, and gets certain little passive effects in those elements, and then a lot of feats to further take advantage of those elements. So, you're going to find that certain spells are performing better in certain environments based on the feats that you've taken as a Geomancer. It's a pretty straightforward concept. It's got a few cool abilities, and it's really, really flavorful and a lot of fun. And because it's versatile, you're not locked into a set one every day. It's more sort of let me attune to this area that I'm in now. You don't have that old 3.5 Ranger problem of, I'm designed to fight undead. I hope there are undead, or, the Ranger's favorite terrain. I am designed for deserts, and we're at sea. Half of my class features aren't doing anything for me, so it's not like that. As long as you're in some type of terrain, which unless you're floating in the void, I don't think there's an astral plane sort of option. So unless you're in some sort of void, you're probably going to be in some kind of terrain, and you're probably going to be able to make use of this archetype. Next, we have a few options that are more specific to the GM in terms of how you're building your world. There are things that you can choose to use or not use as is appropriate. One of them is Ley Lines, and Ley Lines are these ideas that certain places are sort of magically attuned, and you can draw power from these certain points called Ley Lines. Different Ley Lines may have different effects and things like that. They're not generally going to be the same, but anybody gets access to an action called that allows you to tap into a Ley Line. In addition to a few different types of Ley Lines that you can use and the ability to tap into them to different effects depending on the type, you can also learn a couple of rituals to empower or modify the Ley Lines that you have. Next up is Pervasive Magic, and that's just the idea that in this world that you're playing in, magic is sort of everywhere. Every town has, maybe not just every town has a few wizards, wizard guilds and competing wizard schools, even in small towns. But it could be even more than that, like, every farmer is using little bits of magic to help make sure the crops come in. Every sailor is mending sails with magic. So, you can really dial it in and have this super duper high fantasy world, sort of like everybody is living in the wizarding world instead of, wizards hanging out in muggle world that fantasy tends to usually feel like. What's interesting there is it provides a couple of special backgrounds. I forgot, there are a lot of backgrounds actually in this book. Weird place to interject, but there are a lot of backgrounds in this book. But the Pervasive Spellcasting will give you a couple more backgrounds to better fit that type of game. And it also gives you a lot of feats that can slot in for any class as sort of class feats. So, your fighter might be able to just, without having to take a full dedication, might be able to just pick up some cantrips, for example. One interesting thing there is that they also give you some rules on little modifications you might sort of make as blanket changes to different types of creatures, depending on, if you have that heightened magic level or not. Next up, we have a special dedication called Shadow Magic. We also get quite a little bit of lore on how that works, where you might encounter it in Golarion. But the gist is, it's sort of this entropic sort of, anti-magic sort of thing, basically. It isn't like anti-magic that shuts down magic. It's this sort of not quite, but also it is magic sort of thing, where you're just manipulating shadows and things like that. It's really cool. It's got a lot of things there to make a lot of cool character concepts. There's even a Shadow Familiar, which is just your shadow. And there is elsewhere, there's a Shadow Animal Companion template that you can get. One thing that's cool with the Shadowcaster is that if you already have a Shadow Dancer, or you were already thinking of doing a Shadow Dancer, they get access to all of the Shadow Dancer feats as well. I kind of would like to see if the Shadow Dancer could also get some of the Shadowcasters, but I understand why they're not, because most of them really are assuming that you're already a spellcaster, and if you are, then just take the Shadowcaster dedication. It's lower level entry point, and it's a lot more spellcaster focused. We get rules for soul seeds, which are these sort of relics that live inside of your body. They're, instead of being items that you find, they're part of you, as well as a couple of new relic gifts. Again, the soul seeds use the same rules as relics. It's just they're part of a character instead of part of an item. Another archetype that we got, there's, like I said, there's a lot. Another one that we got is the Soul Forger. And the Soul Forger is, I was sort of thinking it was going to be like a soul knife from, 3rd edition D&D. But what it actually is much more like just having a conjurable weapon or shield or armor. As such, it seems like it'd be a great fit, an additional archetype for a champion, for example. And I think it is the iconic champion that they use the art of for the start of the section. And it's really cool if you're familiar with old school anime where, you call out and your armor just, appears on you so that you can, better go fight evil. Power Rangers, Saint Seiya, stuff like that. It's very much filling that vibe. It's a pretty good archetype. I was worried it was going to be pretty broken, and honestly, the dedication is really solid, just that first feat. So if you're the kind of person who is just a martial character who's got a dead level, it's a pretty good choice, honestly. It would be really hard to make a case for why you wouldn't want it. It's just really good, and it's just nice to be able to say, oh no, I've got my sword, it's right here. But with that said, it's definitely, there's a lot. I'll just say I think it's a really front-loaded sort of thing. It's going to be pretty tempting for a lot of characters. Next up, we get Thassilonian Rune Mages, which is a wizard-specific class archetype, where you get proficiency with pole arms, of all things. It's a very Galarian-specific thing. The Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path, for example, is all about these Rune Lords. And it's powered by the 7 deadly sins sort of thing, where you have wrath and sloth, and you're just sort of associated with this sin and a corresponding school of magic. So wrath is evocation. You get mad, you blow stuff up, and you get some nice little powers. It's a really nice way for them to boost up the sort of honestly lackluster feel of having a favored school in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. But there are some drawbacks. You lock yourself out of casting spells from 2 other spell schools. So I think it is Illusion and Abjuration for Evocation. I don't know. But it's different for all of them. So whichever one you pick has a set couple of schools that you cannot use. So it's an interesting choice. It's a tough call. There's some power to it. But locking yourself out of some classic spells is a pretty tough choice. Next up, we have True Name Magic, and that is this idea that everything has a sort of a cosmic, true, real name, and learning that name can give you some advantages over that substance, creature, or person. And so the idea is that there's a skill feat that help you learn a name, and there are some spells and things that allow you to take advantage of those names. And generally, you'll get a small bonus to certain things if you know the thing's true name. It really is a classic spellcasting archetype from like stories and stuff to have these true names. Patrick Rothfuss, the Name of the Wind, for example, is just this whole idea of it's like a science. It's just catalog. If you learn the name of this thing, you have power over it. Finally, we have Wellspring Magic, and it's a spontaneous only class archetype. And if you're a spontaneous caster, it basically allows you to, when you roll initiative or when something crazy enough happens, you roll a die, and it's going to affect you that round. You may get bonus spell slots that you have to use immediately. So it's a sort of thing of like, here's some extra power. You can cast these spells without spending spell slots. That's great. The flip side is there can be some pretty either situational things that aren't going to help you in a given instance or be downright detrimental to your party. There are some feats that you can get to allow you to sort of adjust and make the most of what could be a bad situation, or sort of fudge things in a direction that's a little more advantageous to you. But that's the gist of it. It's a lot like Wild Magic in D&D 5e and other editions as well. But I will say it's only 20 different things that can happen, and they are much less, at least in my experience. And I haven't got experience with 2e yet, but from the looks of it, it looks like it's going to be a lot less disruptive to the average game than some of the Wild Magic stuff is. Not completely not disruptive, but just a little less. And that's it. That's the Secrets of Magic book. I hold it up, but I just have the digital version that I had. The physical copy is still coming. Shipped out last week, I think. But as of today, this should be September 2nd, I believe, that we're posting this. If it's a day later or whatever. Either way, it's out. As I'm filming it, it just came out earlier today. So the point is it's available. You can go and get it at your friendly local gaming store, at paizo.com, wherever you get this sort of thing. You can get a physical copy, or you can get the PDF for that instant gratification if you don't mind going all digital. And I believe there's also going to be the pocket edition, the small paperback rule books, probably coming later this year or next year. Paizo's been doing a really good job pushing those out. I think it's a terrific book if you have spellcasters in your party, or you've just been waiting for the Magus and the Summoner. And I have, I love Magus, I love a good Gish. And that's something else I do want to say, is the Magus is not the only way to Gish that this book gives you. It also gives you some really cool options for new spells that kind of fill that Gishy void. So even if you're not wanting to change up your fighter that multi-classed into sorcerer or wizard or whatever it may have been, you're still going to have a few spells that you can get access to that will help you with initiating combat and allowing you to both get a magical effect and still have plenty of room to get a strike in with some additional benefits. Seriously, there's a lot of really cool new spells that got very experimental. We have a couple of spells that can actually be more than one round of cast time, 2 rounds to be exact, and they can get pretty wild. So, I imagine we're going to continue to see them push what this 3-action economy and what these variable action spells can and will look like as we move forward, and this is just a great indicator of that. So I love this book. I'm excited about it. Next up, we're looking forward to Guns and Gears, our next big rule book, but we're also getting Grand Bazaar, Absalom City of Lost Omens at some point, theoretically. They just announced a book that's all about the Knights of Last Wall. That's going to be pretty interesting, I think. But maybe biggest news of all, at least in terms of biggest surprise, is we have got a new playtest that's been announced after Gen Con. We'll probably get some hints during Gen Con, which is the weekend of September 18th. I'm not sure what the actual dates are, but I do know that September 18th is part of it. But yeah, so at Gen Con, after Gen Con, they're going to announce a couple of new playtests, probably for books that are coming out next year. So come on over to our Discord, speculate about what that's going to be, what you want it to be, or down in the comments as well. We love the comments. We do our best to keep up on them. If you are excited about that, come join the Discord. Like I said, we're a friendly bunch over there. We'd love to have you. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, if you like our content, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. It really helps us out. Helps keep us motivated and excited when we see that we're doing a good job. You guys are liking what we put out. So thanks so much for watching. Welcome to the collective, and we'll see you next time.